we show up to court. My mother gets up in front of the judge and she keeps it 100 with the judge. She said, "Your Honor, my son is out here not living right. He's out here on drugs, and I would rather see him do 2 years in prison than see him dead in 6 months out here on drugs." My name is James Dawkins. I work at Scioto Trails Advancing Abilities, and that's working with adults with developmental disabilities, helping them take care of themselves and go out their daily routines and activities. So today I'm going to tell you about where my life began and where my addiction took me, and what me being hard-headed and finally having to listen to the advice being given to me about following God and Him showing me things to get me. My addiction took me down a very deep hole. I started with just marijuana and alcohol, ended up using cocaine, started using crack, eventually moved on to using meth. My addiction took me to prison, and eventually that was where I opened my eyes and realized I had to change because I had kids. I really seen the strain that my addiction put on my kids, as well as my parents. My father, he couldn't sleep or anything while I was in prison. So I'm gonna just give you the whole layout of everything. So my addiction, my life was a little different. My parents, they worked very hard. Growing up, I never seen my dad without a job. I never seen my mom without a job. My father was in the military, so at the age of 5, me, my father, my older brother, and my older sister, we moved to Europe, and we lived on the Air Force Base in Germany. The first Air Force base we lived on was called Wiesbaden, and then we lived there for 3 years, and then the one I remember more about growing up was called Ramstein. So growing up in Europe, it was different. We lived on a Air Force base full of American people. It was like it was really just a big apartment complex with a school inside of it, a little shopping center inside of it. But if you were with your parents, you could go outside the base and you could drive almost anywhere. We would drive to Holland. We would drive to Amsterdam. I've been to Paris. I've been skiing in Switzerland. I did all of these things before the age of 11 years old. So after my father retired from the military and we moved back to Ohio in 1996, it was kind of a culture shock, because just even telling somebody like, yeah, I just moved back here from Germany, people would tell you, man, you're a liar. You ain't never, you're a German. Like, so it was a bit different, trying to fit in, and you had to learn not to even tell nobody you came here from Germany. I'd just be like, I told them where I was born. I'm from Colorado. We just moved to Ohio, So that was the first time I began smoking weed, was in the 5th grade. Basically, I had some money and my brothers didn't, and I wanted to smoke, and they allowed me to smoke that one time, and that's where it began. After that, my parents had got their house built, and we moved into the suburbs of Pickerington, Ohio. And where our neighborhood was, it was Pickerington School District, but it's a Reynoldsburg zip code. But it was, the one neighborhood had 4 different zip codes in it, because it was Canal Winchester, Groveport, Reynoldsburg, and Pickerington. So we met a lot of different people. Going to that school, you were introduced to a lot of different things, just casually going out to parties and hanging out and meeting new people. I was introduced to cocaine, which was something that I fell in love with because my drug of choice was uppers. So I started using cocaine probably around the age of 15 or 16, just socially going to parties and doing it on the weekends and stuff. Nothing too out of control, but eventually one thing led to another, and I was an adult. I dropped out of high school. I went to 3 years of high school and got expelled all 3 times. Just being bad, getting in trouble, doing stupid stuff. So after I dropped out of high school, I moved out of my parents' house and was staying with a friend, and I was pretty much able to do what I wanted there as long as I maintained a job and paid my part of the bills. So we would drink every day. We would drink and smoke weed. That was our thing to do. We would make sure we had a bottle every day to drink, or on Saturday night we would get 2 bottles because we knew Sunday the liquor store wasn't open. So eventually I moved back into my mom's house out of my friend's house, and I got with her friend from work who was a real good family friend of ours, and I moved in with him thinking it would be a better situation, but that's where his little brother introduced me to crack. And the type of addict I was, crack was like one of the most amazing things at that point, but I never knew where it would take me. Crack will have you somewhere longer than you want to stay and keep you there. So after I was introduced to crack, I had a friend, the same friend whose house I had moved out of. He was somebody who never judged me. He never, he looked at because he liked cocaine. I liked crack. So he never judged me. But it was some friends of ours that found out about it, and they used to call me Jimmy Crack Corn. And this was probably in my 20s. So that was the joke. My name is James, so we're gonna call him Jimmy Crack Corn. And so that, that hurt. That, it was embarrassing, but what could I say? Honestly, that was good. That was a good eye opener to this is what comes along with what you're doing. So at this point, I had moved back down to Chillicothe, and I got with my wife that I'm married to now, but we were still dating then. This is when the pills started taking over, and basically there was a guy I met that I was purchasing my pills from, and he noticed that I had a minivan, and he said, "How much you would charge me to take a trip to Florida?" So I'm like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Let me put some people in your van and you drive y'all to Florida." So I knew what it was. I knew it was the pill doctors in Florida. So I was like, well, you have to pay for me to go to the doctor too. So I load up my van, follow him with a car full of people down. We drive down to Florida. We start going to the pill doctor. You go in there, you get an MRI. You're sitting there, it's probably as big as this sanctuary. You sit in there, all kinds of people from everywhere. You go outside and look at the parking lot, you'll see license plates from every surrounding state from Florida. And me at the time, I was 130 pounds. I was 22 years old. I've never had any major surgeries or anything major, like injuries or anything wrong with my body. And the doctor wrote me 180 perk 30s, 90 15s, and 30 Xanax. So I came back to Ohio, Chillicothe. I sold the perk 30s, did the 15s, and went back down to the doctor and continued this process for a few months. And as I gradually continued going more and more, my addiction grew as much as the amount of pills that I was going. And eventually this ended up, the doctor, we went down one time, and everybody that was with me, their appointment was in the morning, and my appointment was supposed to be in the afternoon. So everybody was being seen. So I said, hey, can I pay $50 or something to get my appointment early? The guy let me pay him and get my appointment moved to the AM. We left the pill doctor and got back to the hotel, which was probably about a 15-minute drive. And the doctor's office is on the news, being raided by the feds. Now, most people don't see that and just think, oh, we just got it. But no, that's God, like God saving my life. And even though I was doing wrong, he still kept his hand on me, because if the feds was coming, what kept them from coming 10 minutes, 15 minutes earlier than what they came? So that was, a big time that God was in my life and it kept his hand on me, but I still didn't want to reach out to him. So after that, we continued doing that. We found another doctor farther down in Florida, in Miami, that we continued to go to for a while, but they ended up getting closed too. But at the time that those doctors had ended up closing, the addiction to the pills was already there. So at this time in Chillicothe, when I first began going to Florida with the pills, they were selling for about 25 or 30 bucks. By the time I stopped going and they were hard to get, they were selling for $35 or $40 a pill. So naturally, half the people doing pills just went to heroin because it was cheaper. And I tried heroin a couple times, but I never used a needle. I snorted it a few times. It just wasn't for me. But not having the pills made me still crave and want something else. So at that point, that was when I started using meth. I was probably 24 the first time I used meth as a substitute for the pills. And it lasted longer and it was cheaper, but you just had to know somebody to get it from, which was hard. So down here, I didn't do it very long. But in the process of the pills, one of my good friends that I've grown up with, he came to me with a scheme that we were doing at the time. And it was a credit card scheme. We would buy stolen credit card numbers off the internet and use this machine to put them onto a prepaid credit card that we had with our name on it, program the magnetic strip, and go use it at the store. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. And we did this for probably 10 months. And we were in Columbus. Like I was doing this so much that, like, at one point in life, I didn't even respect the value of $1 because we were buying and stealing so many people's money that we didn't even respect it. We would just go and buy anything. If this card didn't work, we'd swipe another one. If that one didn't work, we had 5 other cards to swipe. And one day we were doing it, and we were really far up north of Columbus. And I went into this Myers, and I swiped the card, it declined. I pulled out another card and I swiped it, it declined, and I should have just left. But I was, I'm trying to get what I'm trying to get, so I tried to swipe again, and when it declined, I just left. And by the time I got outside, the police was already out there, Delaware County or Delaware City Police or County Police. And they already knew what was going on because they had a machine in their cruisers that all they had to do was swipe that card, and if the numbers that showed up in their computer didn't match the last 4 digits on that credit card that they're looking at in their hand, then they knew you were up to a scam. So I got busted. I had, I think, 12 cards on me, and I had gift cards that I had already previously purchased earlier in that day. So I got charged with that. I got charged with forgery and identity theft. And then I was on probation in Ross County for forgery for using my brother's identity. And then I got indicted through Franklin County for the same thing. So I had a total of 22 charges. I had forgery, identity theft, and criminal tools. So I'm sitting in jail, and I'm just trying to plead it out so I can get out of county jail and get to prison and get it over with. And my lawyer is like, do you have anybody that would come speak on your behalf? And I was like, yeah. I said, my mom and dad will come speak. I give them their house number. They're like, yeah, we'll show up to court and we'll speak. So I'm like, okay, my mom and dad, they'll come to court and, plead with the judge about their child. We show up to court. My mother gets up in front of the judge and she keeps it 100 with the judge. She said, Your Honor, my son is out here not living right. He's out here on drugs, and I would rather see him do 2 years in prison than see him dead in 6 months out here on drugs. And the judge looked at her, and the judge gave me 20 months. He sentenced me to 20 months in prison. But at that moment, I was so mad and heartbroken, and I couldn't even calculate how much time 20 months was. It just sounded like a lifetime of time to me, you know what I mean? This is the first time I'm ever going to prison. So I go back to holding, to go back to the county and wait until I get shipped out to prison, and I'm just mad, I'm upset. And in there, you can either be real with yourself and be honest, or you can live in a fantasy and blame others and make this up and tell yourself and convince yourself whatever it is, but it's majority of the time it's not going to be the truth if it's always somebody else's fault that something happened. So I prayed about it and I read my Bible, and I'm like, what would I have done if this was my son? And I'm like, I don't know, because I've never been there. But I know my mom has never wanted nothing but the best for me, so she may know something that I don't. So I would call her and we would talk, and my mom would always keep money on the phone to make sure I could talk to my children. That's one thing she always did. It took me about 14 days to leave from the county jail to go to prison, which you go from there to CRC, which is Correctional Reception Center. You walk in cuffed to a stranger. You're brought in about 3 at a time. They make you strip, bend over, cough. The CO watches you while you do it. put you in another room, throw some clothes at you, tell you get dressed, give you a number, and from that day until your release date, that's what you'll be known as. My number was 705-966. It's a number I'll never forget because that's what I was identified by for the 2.5 years I was in prison. CRC, man, like I seen some things that it's just you wonder how somebody can go through that in CRC, but also when you disrespect these guards and that's the power that they have, I mean, I don't know who's right or wrong. But in there you have to stay on your P's and Q's. You have to, me personally, I tried to keep my head down, mind my business, not bring any attention to myself. Because there were guards that I remember there was one time I was trying to sneak my oranges back from the cafeteria to my cell, which we're not allowed to do. And it was this one captain. "Come here, inmate, what is you doing?" I said, "Nothing, sir." He said, "What you got in your pocket?" And he grabbed my pocket and squeezed these 2 oranges in my pocket. So I had orange juice running all down my leg, and you only get to wash your clothes every 3 days. You get to wash your clothes. So now I'm down to 1 pair of pants for another 3 days because I tried to sneak something out of there. Now I could be mad and I could go back and start acting a fool and cussing the other guards out, or I could look at, man, I don't think I'm gonna try to sneak any more oranges out. But you would see both sides of those behaviors in there, and it would get ugly for some of the guys who would do those type of things. It's sad for the guards, it's sad for the inmates. So after that, I sat there for about 30 days, which the first time I went, it was 23-hour lockdown. You get out for showers every other day. You get out to eat, and you get out for rec once a week during the summer. Other than that, you're in the cell with your cellie, hot, cold, whatever it is, 23 hours a day. So after that, you get assigned to the home prison that you're gonna go to. Once you're assigned, you'll leave the correctional reception center in about a week. I went to a prison called Madison Correctional Institution in London, Ohio. It was a more laid-back prison. It was, a lot of the guys who were there had been there for a long time, so it wasn't one of the real rowdy prisons where there was a whole bunch of fights and problems and things there, but there were a lot of drugs in there because of the guys who work outside the fence or whatever. So when I got there, me and my mother, she never knew we was on bad terms, but to me, we was back on good terms because I seen that, what I was doing was wrong and I got caught. I was, whether I got away with it or not, I was still wrong. So I had a friend who was taking my mother money to give to me. And she was also at the time taking care of my 2 children. So when he gave her the money, he gave her $200. I think she put like $50 on my books. And I had the nerve to be offended. And I'm like, how dare she not put the money on there? That was supposed to be for me. I was gonna order a TV with that money. And when I said that to my mom said, "A TV?" She said, "Boy, you're in prison. You don't need a TV in there. You buy a TV for when you're for your home. You buy a TV for where you're gonna permanently rest your head and get comfortable. You ain't supposed to get comfortable in there and have no TV. And at that moment, you know, it was an eye opener to me, because it was a realization that there's some of these guys that really go to prison because they can be comfortable in there. And I heard, like, I just overheard a phone conversation one day in the phone room. It's a phone room with like 7 phones. And the guy's on the phone talking to his mom, and he's telling her, like, yeah, Mom, there's a Nintendo Wii in here. We just got signed up for a volleyball tournament. I only got to go work in the kitchen for like 2.5 hours a day. And it was like, it sounded like he was bragging about prison to her. And I walked past his bunk one day, and what do I see? He got a TV in there, up under his bunk. He's got a bottom rack. He's got the TV up under there so he could lay in the bed and watch the TV. And I was like, wow. I said, that is crazy to want to do that. So at that point, I told myself, I said, okay, I'm going to be here this long. I'm going to make something at a time. So the first thing I did was get in school. Now, when I was at CRC, they let you out of the cell of one of them 23-hour lockdown days, and they have you do some little testing and booklets, but everybody's so, including myself, you so glad to be out of the cell. I ain't hear nothing the people said to me that day when we took the test. So when I was in prison and I tried to go get in school, the lady pulled up some tests and said that I was a 2nd grade reading level and a 4th grade math level based on the testing that I took at CRC. So I said, oh Lord. I'm like, well, is there any way I could retake the test or something? I said, I didn't even remember taking the test or answering no questions correctly or nothing. So she told me to show up the next day at 7 a.m. and I could take the test. So I went and I showed up, I took the test, I turned it in, and I leave. I get back to my area, and I see the guards searching through all my stuff. Sheets, drawers, all my clothes, my locker with food in it. They're searching everything. I don't know what's going on. Then the lady from the schooling calls me back down there, and she says, well, I had to report it because you scored a perfect score on the test, and going from what you scored at CRC to having a perfect score, they had to make sure that you didn't cheat on the test. So from that point on, they allowed me to get in school, and I attended school. I think it took me 6 months to get my GED. So once I got my GED, I enrolled into a dorm that had programs. It was a program dorm where I was able to take like Thinking for a Change, money management classes, Cage of Rage, Positive Dads, just a bunch of different courses and learning groups and things to just try to change my thoughts and thought process of how I wanted to be. And then I did that for 6 months. And then my last 6 months that I was in the prison, I joined the military program. Now, a lot of people in the prison laughed about it, and they would make fun of us because we were in prison, but we treated it like we were really part of the military. So we marched to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We hung a flag up Monday morning, took it down Friday, folded it. We did all the things, but it also came with its benefits. When I joined the military program, they helped me draft up a letter to my judge to be able to work off my fines while I was in prison. They allowed me to work out every day in a private gym. So it came with the ridicule, but it also came with its perks. So by this time, it was time for me to go to the halfway house. I was planning on living in Columbus with my mother, but the halfway house they sent me to was down here in Chillicothe on 104. So I got to the halfway house. I did my risk assessment. They said that I was a low risk assessment to reoffend. So I didn't have to do any of the reoffender classes or anything like that. So I sat in the halfway house for 2 months. I was trying to get a job. They told me because I was not going to live in Chillicothe, I couldn't get a job because they want to save those jobs for the people who would stay and live in Chillicothe. So at this point, I had been in the halfway house for 2 months. They said they needed to reassess me and something had been done wrong. And now I needed to take reoffender classes before I was permitted to start working. So me being the overreactor that I am, I blew up and started cussing everybody out and talking. I told him I started cussing him out, and the guy told me if I didn't sit down, he was going to send me back to prison. And I said, I don't care where you send me. As long as you can't stop time, it doesn't matter where I'm at. So he wrote me up for that. And after that, I think I lasted 2 more weeks. I got caught with a phone I wasn't supposed to have. So eventually I earned my way back to prison for the last month and a half of my sentence. So I go back to CRC. I sit in there for I go back to Ross County Jail. I sit in Ross County Jail for 2 weeks. I sit in CRC for 2 more weeks, and then I get sent to Lebanon Honor Camp. So Lebanon Honor Camp it's a smaller, it's right by Leb prison, but it's a small camp of like 200 people. I think it was 192 people when I was there. So when I got there, it was July. I had to be in there till September 26th. I got there July 1st. It was a different environment because a lot of the guys there were been down since the 60s or 70s, and this was as good as it got for them. And you just see guys like, man, you've really been in here since before I was born. Like, to imagine being in prison 30 years is crazy, but it's a realization that some people really went and made bad decisions in a split second, like I did at the halfway house, where I was mad and I'm cussing people out, and I tell this guy, and he's like, oh, okay, you mean what you say. You say you don't matter. So he got me I got myself sent back to prison. I'm not gonna say he got me sent. I got myself sent back to prison. And now I'm looking at guys that's been in prison 30 and 40 years, and it's like, man, is this what I want to continue in life to be? Is this what I want to further and continue coming down this road in and out of prison? I went through one, got out, was in the halfway house, was able to see my kids and different things like that. But now I'm back. So it was a real eye-opener, man, because I just realized, like, man, this is not something I want to continue to do and put myself in this environment. You never know what's going to happen, riot or anything. So after I got out, I had convinced myself I was really ready for the change and be a father. And one thing my mom always said to me was, you know, if I want to know what you're doing, I'm just going to look at who you're hanging out with. That's going to tell me all I need to know. So some of the same people that I promised I wouldn't hang around before I went to prison, I started hanging around. And one of them, he just happened to sell a lot of meth or deal with a lot of methamphetamine. So one day I was around him and he was doing his thing and running around, and I happened to steal some out of his bag. And I stole it was probably a chunk, probably long as my finger. And the first time I tried to do it, I didn't know you couldn't snort it. So I snorted the meth, and it was like snorting pure salt and pepper. It hurt so bad. But the high was, like I said, I like uppers. So the high was, I was up for 2 days just off of that one line. So it was like, wow. So at this time, I got out of prison. I'd only done that meth that time, and I ended up going on a cruise with my family and my daughter and some other family members and my grandmother. And on the cruise, you know, I'd take care of my daughter, I'd get my granny up, and we'd all go have breakfast. And a friend of a friend that came with my Aunt Sharon noticed, you know, me taking care of my grandma and things like that. So when we got back to Columbus from the cruise, she offered me a job because she owned her own business taking care of, you know, people with disabilities and helping and things like that. So she gave me a job, and I worked for her taking care of 2 blind guys, and Darren and Paul, I got real close with them, worked with them for like 2 years, but at the same time I was working with them, I was also letting my addiction get out of control. So I ended up getting fired and losing my job for not showing up to work or being late or different things like that. So at this point, I'm running around and hustling with meth and selling it, and I let the guy I was getting meth from put a car in my name so he would give me the meth cheaper. And at this time that I was on meth, I got out of prison. I wasn't with the mother of my children. We were broken up at the time. And she overdoses with my daughter in the car. And she had to be Narcaned, I think, 3 times to be brought back. And that was a wake-up call for all of us, in a sense. But it started a process of, y'all are either gonna get it together, because it brought light to the situation from her parents and from my parents, because that just became real when y'all involved the grandbaby like that. So Children's Services opened a case down here in Ross County. The lady's name was Jennifer Mills, and I'm not gonna lie, at the time I couldn't stand Jennifer Mills, but I love her now because she never tore nobody down, but she was very stern, and she had to put me in my place a few times when I thought I was getting too big for my britches. So they opened the case, and Jordan, my wife, said that she wanted treatment. So they put her in jail and they sent her to treatment. She went to treatment 6 days before, or 6 months before I went off, because I forgot to mention my clean date is January 4th, 2018. So on the 4th of January, I just celebrated 7 years clean. So she went to treatment first, and she joined what they called at the time Family Dependency Court in Ross County with Judge Benson. She joined this, and they offered me a spot, and I had turned it down for the first time. And then finally, because I was ready to get clean, I was tired of Jordan bugging me. She had her friend Tracy Hathaway calling me, and finally I said I would go to treatment. I had my mother drive me down here from Columbus. I had a garbage bag full of clothes, and she dropped me off on Water Street at the Recovery Council, and the maintenance man took me from there to Waverly to Kent's place. Because I was only using meth at the time, I didn't have to detox from anything, but I had been up for days, so I was going to groups, sleeping, go on break, sleep. I did that for about a week, and I finally got I got a good counselor who really told me what I needed to hear. She didn't sugarcoat it. She just kept it real with me. And it really helped. It really showed me some things, because one of the things she made me do, and I didn't even know, but she reached out to my parents and had my parents write impact letters. And basically what you do is in a group, when you're graduating in front of it, or in a group in front of everybody, you read this letter. And, my parents said some things to me that I never knew, that you don't think about the pain that you cause somebody else just running through your addiction. I never thought about the nights my mom stayed up praying for me, the sorrow and heartache my dad felt from not knowing whether I was okay or not. I never really, I don't think I cared during my addiction who I hurt, as long as I didn't hurt you financially and I wasn't stealing from you. I feel like I wasn't causing you no pain. So after I lost the job, the meth really got out of control. I went to treatment. Jordan had been clean for probably around 10 months at this time. She said, "Hey, everybody's going to an Overcomers night. Do you think y'all will be able to go?" Well, I didn't know that they were already signing up to go, because one of the RAs wanted to go and somebody had told him. So we go to this Overcomers night. I had been in Chillicothe at this time probably close to 15, 16 years. Always seen Zion, but I never once knew who pastored it, or I knew the name, but I didn't know what he looked like. So we go to the Overcomers night, and they put this play on. The guys at ACM, they put this play on. And it was basically a play about addiction and how the chains of addiction grab you. And when I watched this play, I didn't see the people in the play acting. I seen myself in my addiction, and I was like, man, when I leave the safety net of this rehab center that I'm in, I don't want those chains to reattach to me. So I said right then and there, okay, well, I'm gonna go to ACM. Like, my mind was made up. That's where I want to go. That's the only place. So I started making sure I attended the Overcomers nights and reaching out and filled my application out and reached out to Rochelle as much as I could and Reese, and I got accepted into ACM on May 7th was the day I left Kent's place and came to ACM. And I lived on the Western Avenue house. And I'd always knew God had his hand on me, but I really needed the right direction and guidance to tap in to, everything God has for me. And I knew that Pastor Gray, man, like he says it the way I need to hear it so I can understand it, and makes it plain and clear for me. And I knew that was the leadership that I wanted to follow. So I went to ACM. I was in ACM from May of 2018. I think I graduated in March of 2019. And I worked for ACM for a year, and after that I went on to work for the Recovery Council for 3 years. But working in that field sometimes, man, like, it can burn you out, and I feel like I just got burned out, man. Like, it gets sometimes you can beat yourself up when you got clients that you see are doing so good, and then it just takes that one relapse, and now this person's dead, that person's dead. Like, sometimes it just burns you out, man. So I decided to make a job change, man, and go back into the healthcare field. And I think partly because my youngest child that I have he was born with Down syndrome, which Down syndrome, man, you never really know exactly how it's going to affect each individual child per se. But I didn't know what to expect when he was born. We just knew that, we treated him like the other two. And he's a high functioning man. He's if I bring him in this room right now, this whole room gonna brighten up. But it also made me think, like, I need to prepare later on in life for how I'm gonna be taking care of him, or the kind of care that I'm gonna have to place him in. So I just went back to working in the healthcare field, man. I've been clean for 7 years. I got married, and I just try to follow God, man. I try to stay involved with God, man. He gave me a word the other day when I was just studying, man, and he said to me, the most valuable thing that I ask of people is time. Yet everybody still convinces themselves they can't afford it. And I was just like, I don't know. When he said that to me, and the words just came to me, I was like, dang, time, that's it. We don't even really respect how valuable time is. That's the most valuable thing we have, and we can't get any of it back that we waste. Not 1 second. So when he said that to me, man, it spoke to me just that I need to really step my game up and get my commitment and my following to God, man, just continue to grow it and allow him to speak to me and guide me and keep me on this path, man, because even though I've got 7 years clean, it's not easy. It's still sitting somewhere, that demon's still sitting somewhere doing push-ups, ready to try to jump on me, and if I don't stay stronger than it'll be right back there. For somebody that's struggling, man, I would really say, be honest with yourself, man. Think about the ones who you know love you, your mother, your father, your children, your brothers, your sisters, and make the hard decision and go ask for help. Because that's what a lot of it is the pride or not being able to take that step. Just take the step to do it. Don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, because in the long run, you'll learn that what you got to say or what you've been through ain't nothing to be embarrassed about, because it's going to help somebody, even if it's just one person. It'll help them. My name is James Dawkins. I want to thank you for listening to me, and God bless you.